Don't forget, we're giving away 2 copies of EA UFC 4. All you got to do is jump over to the video that's going to be linked up above, hit that like button, subscribe to our page, leave a comment on that video, tell us what kind of console you got. When we get to 500 subscribers, we're giving away 2 copies of EA UFC 4. How's it going, Can Crushers? Welcome to another episode of the Crushing Cans Podcast Pick'em Show. Today, we're talking about UFC Fight Night Vegas 8, Anthony Smith versus Alexander Rakic. We kick off the night with the prelims. The first fight of the night is Christian Aguilera versus Sean Brady. Sean Brady is an American. He's 12-0 as a professional, and he went 4-0 as an amateur. He's 27 years old, 5 feet 10 inches tall, with a 72-inch reach. Brady is currently 2-0 in the UFC, both wins coming by decision over Ismail Nuradov and Court McGee. He's the former Cage Fury 170-pound champion, and he was able to successfully defend that belt 2 times. He's a BJJ black belt with 7 knockouts on his record, 3 decision wins, and 3 submission wins. He has good, fast, straight hands and a really good counter left hand that he used to drop Court McGee in the first round. He does mix in some leg kicks, but he doesn't move his head very often, and it leaves him open to get countered sometime. Now he's going against Christian Aguilera. Christian Aguilera is an American, and he's 14-6 in MMA. He's 28 years old, 5 feet 9 inches tall, with a 73-inch reach. He's currently 1-0 in the UFC, coming off of a first-round knockout of Anthony Ivy. He has 10 knockouts, 3 decisions, and 1 submission on his record. However, he has been knocked out 4 times. He's lost by split decision once, and he has lost by decision once. He has good takedowns with solid top control where he's able to land a lot of ground and pound. However, I don't know if he's going to be able to do that against Sean Brady. He does also have good, accurate strikes on the feet. But for my prediction for this fight, I predict Sean Brady wins by decision. Then we move on to the second fight of the night. This is Emily Spitfire Whitmire versus Polyana Polly Viana at 115 pounds. This fight was originally scheduled for UFC 248. Unfortunately, Whitmire missed weight. She weighed in at 117.5 pounds. That's 1.5 pounds past the limit. And then she passed out and was rushed to the hospital afterwards. So the fight was rescheduled to this event. Emily Whitmire, she's an American. She's 4-3 as a professional, and she went 4-4 as an amateur. I actually had the pleasure of watching her compete as an amateur. She fought in a local show called the Full Contact Fighting Federation. It's the same place that I made my amateur debut as a fighter, and it's owned by professional fighter Chael Sonnen. Emily's 29 years old. She's 5 feet 5 inches tall. She has a 63-inch reach. She made her way into the UFC through The Ultimate Fighter, where she ultimately went 1-1. She defeated Christina Marks by armbar in round 1, and then she lost to Roxanne Modafferi from elbows. Since then, she's been in the UFC, and she's gone 2-2. She has 3 decision wins and 1 submission win on her record. All 3 of her losses, though, have come by submission as well. She has decent striking, but she seems a little bit hesitant to get hit. But she does throw decent combos. She does like to close the distance and get in and grapple. I don't know if that's necessarily the best idea going against Polyana Viana. Polyana is from Brazil. She's 10-4 in mixed martial arts. She's 29 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, and she has a 67-inch reach. So in this fight, she'll enjoy a 4-inch reach advantage. She is, however, 1-3 in the UFC. She's currently on a 3-fight losing streak, so this is a must-win situation for her right now if she wants to continue to fight inside of the UFC. Most recently, she lost by armbar in the first round to Veronica Macedo. Her only win in the UFC was in her UFC debut against Maya Stevenson, and she was able to submit her with a rear naked choke in round 1. Ultimately, I predict that Polyana Viana is going to submit Emily Whitmire in the first round. All right, so we move on to the next fight of the night. This is the fight that I'm most excited about. This fight's changed a few times. Originally, this was supposed to be Alex Caceres versus Giga Chikadze. Giga Chikadze ended up pulling out last minute. They tried to throw in Kevin Kroom in there. That fight was scheduled for about 4 or 5 hours, and then it fizzled out real fast. And then ultimately, they brought in my boy, Austin Springer. Austin Springer is one of my buddies. He's been in the MMA scene for a long time. We were on the same team together. He actually used to be sparring partners with Rick Story and Mike Pierce over at Brave Legion, which he now owns that gym, and the name has changed. It's now Vancouver Elite Martial Arts. That's Austin Springer's gym that he owns. This past local youth wrestling season, we coached on the same team. Our kids were on the same team together. We've trained together. He's actually been in my corner for one of my professional fights. I'm really excited for him to get this debut. We've been calling for him. One of our first videos we put out on this channel was for Austin Springer, saying Austin Springer deserves to be in the UFC. So let's dive deeper into this fight now. So Alex Caceres, he's an American. He's 16-12 as a mixed martial artist. He has one no contest. That was originally a decision win. He tested positive for marijuana, and that was overturned to a no contest. He's 32 years old, 5 feet 10 inches tall, with a 73.5-inch reach. He made his way into the UFC through the Ultimate Fighter House, where he ultimately went 2-1 before losing to Michael Johnson by decision. Since competing in the Ultimate Fighter, he's gone 11-10 and 1 in the UFC, that one being the no contest I just talked about. And he's currently on a 2-fight win streak, beating Chase Hooper and Steven Peterson, both by decision. He has 7 split decision fights, and the results of those fights are 3 wins and 3 losses and 1 no contest. It was originally a split decision win. That's the marijuana one, where he tested positive and it got changed to a no contest. He's a Jeet Kune Do style fighter with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He has 8 decision wins, 5 submission wins, and 3 knockout wins on his record. However, he has been submitted 7 times, and he's lost by decision 5 times and submission only once. Bruce Leroy also has significant wins over Sergio Pettis and Cole Miller as well. He moves really well. He mixes in a lot of kicks. He likes to bounce in and out. He's going to stay light on his feet and move around. You're going to see a lot of movement in this fight. And he goes against my boy Austin Springer. Austin Springer is 12-3 in MMA. He's 33 years old, 5 feet 8 inches tall, with a 71.5-inch reach. He is making his debut on short notice, getting the call yesterday, Wednesday, to come out and fight for this Saturday. But he's no stranger to that. When he fought Giga Chikadze on Dana White's Contender Series, he was also a short notice fighter there, and he was able to submit Giga in the 3rd round. Somehow, Giga ended up getting a contract to the UFC first, and he's done well inside of the UFC. So I'm expecting big things from Austin in the UFC as well. Austin's currently on a 3-fight win streak and has a win in Bellator as well. He is the former Main Events MMA 135-pound, 145-pound, and 155-pound champion, as well as the former Prime FC 145-pound champion. Of his 3 losses, 2 of them come to UFC veterans. One of them was by 2nd-round knockout to Julian Erosa, and the other one was by 1st-round submission to Steven Seiler. His other loss was a split decision loss. Austin Springer is known for having a good gas tank. He came into the Contender Series facing Giga on short notice. A lot of people were questioning whether or not he'd have the gas tank in that fight. He was able to push through and then really pick it up in the 3rd round. I expect to see the same thing here. Austin's really got to be careful of the submission game from Alex Caceres. Ultimately, what I expect Austin to do is to bounce around light on his feet, pick his shots, stepping in and out, throwing hard punches, and working Caceres back towards the cage and using that to take Caceres down on the ground. He does have to be careful of the submissions from Caceres once it gets to the ground, but he's a Fabiano Scherner trained jiu-jitsu guy as well, and he's partners with guys like Ricky Simone. Austin Springer was actually Ricky Simone's coach when Ricky Simone was an amateur making his way up in the amateur ranks. And now they are training partners at American Top Team Portland under Fabiano Scherner. My prediction for this fight is Austin Springer by decision. Then we move on to the next fight on the card. This is Alessio Monzo Di Chirico versus Zach Cummings. Alessio Di Chirico, he's from Italy. He's 12-4, 30 years old, 6 feet tall, with a 74-inch reach. He's currently 3-4 in the UFC on a 2-fight decision losing streak to both Magomed Muradov and Kevin Holland. Di Chirico originally got into MMA as a way to lose weight, and then it ended up turning into a career for him. He went 9-0 before signing with the UFC. He has 5 knockouts on his record, 4 submissions, and 3 decisions. Of his losses, he's lost 3 times by decision, and he's been submitted only once. Di Chirico has a very heavy overhand right. He likes to throw it as a counter, and he likes to throw it on its own by itself. You're not going to see a lot of high-volume combos out of Di Chirico. Mostly it's 1 or 2 punches thrown at a time. He's throwing a heavy punch, trying to conserve his energy a little bit there. Maybe he's a very muscular guy, but he doesn't throw very high volume. Look for that one big punch. Look for that counter there. He does also mix in some takedowns, but overall I felt like watching his fights, everything is fairly predictable. And he'll be facing Zach Cummings here. Zach Cummings is an American. He's 23-7 in MMA. He's 36 years old, 6 feet tall, with a 65-inch reach advantage. He does like to switch his stance a little bit from orthodox to southpaw. He'll stand in southpaw and throw some heavy punches, switch back to orthodox, and then go back to southpaw. I think that Zach Cummings is a little bit more of a high-volume striker than Chirico. Zach Cummings made his way into the UFC through the Ultimate Fighter house, where he went 1-1. But since then, being with the UFC, he's gone 8-4 overall. Zach Cummings is coming off of a decision loss to Amari Akhmadov. He does have significant wins over Trevin Giles by third-round submission and Trevor Smith by decision. Cummings has been around for a while. He competed in Strikeforce and Bellator before coming to the UFC. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt with wrestling and kickboxing. He has 12 submissions on his record, 6 decision wins, and 5 knockouts. Of his losses, he's lost by decision 5 times and submission twice, but he's never been knocked out. For this fight, my prediction is Zach Cummings winning by submission in round 2. I don't think he mixes it up enough, and I don't think that he poses enough of a threat to keep Zach Cummings from getting him to the ground. So I think eventually Zach Cummings will take him down to the ground and submit him. I predict that happening in round 2. So then we move on to the 5th fight of the night. This is Mallory Martin versus Hannah Schaefers at 115 pounds. Mallory Martin is an American, 6-3 in MMA. She's 5 feet 4 inches tall, has a 64-inch reach advantage, and she's 0-1 in the UFC, coming off of a second-round rear-naked choke to Verna Jandiroba. Mallory competed on Dana White's Contender Series, where she ultimately won by decision, but she didn't get her contract. She went back and competed with Invicta, where she went 1-0 before she was picked up by the UFC. Overall, she did have a record of 2-1 inside of the Invicta cage, though. She trains in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, wrestling, and boxing. And interestingly enough, her boyfriend is UFC fighter Darren Wynn. You can expect to see aggressive takedown attempts out of her and a really good, solid ground and pound. She likes to strike from every position, but she does have solid strikes on her feet as well. She throws nice and straight down the pipe. Hannah Schaefers is an American. She's 28 years old, 10-6 in MMA, 5 feet 1 inches tall, has a 62-inch reach, and she's 2-4 inside of the UFC. She's currently on a 3-fight losing streak, losing to Mackenzie Dern and Maria Agapova by submission in the first round. And then she also lost by TKO to Angela Hill in the second round. She has a win over Polyana Viena, who fights earlier in the night by split decision. And she has a win over Jody Escobel by decision as well. She has great striking and is very skilled on the ground. She was able to shut down Polyana's jiu-jitsu game on the ground in their fight, and Polyana is a world champion in jiu-jitsu. Schaefers has 3 submission wins to her record, 2 knockout wins, and 1 decision win as well. Ultimately, though, my prediction is Mallory Martin wins by decision. I think that Mallory Martin is going to be a little bit too aggressive with her takedowns. She's going to be able to take her down and control her from there. I don't think that she'll be able to submit her from there, but I think that she'll be able to control her on the ground, land some ground and pound, and end up grinding out a decision. It's going to be a very wrestling-heavy fight, in my opinion. All right, now we move on to the last fight on the undercard. This one is Coconut Bomb's Maki Pitolo versus Shalibo Impa Kasanganay at 185 pounds. Pitolo, he's an American. He's 13-6 overall in MMA, 29 years old. He's 5 feet 10 inches tall, and he has a 73.5-inch reach. He earned his way into the UFC through Dana White's Contender Series, where he was able to stop his opponent, Callan Porter, in the first round with body shots. Since then, he's 1-2 in the UFC, coming off of a submission loss by guillotine to Darren Stewart in the first round. Pitolo does have a win in Bellator, and he is the former Victory FC 170-pound champion. Coconut Bombs has 7 knockouts to his records, 3 submissions, and 2 decisions. Pitolo circles the cage well, has great hands, and throws vicious body shots. Now, he's going against Impa Kasanganay, who also made his way into the UFC through the Ultimate Fighter house. He actually competed 2 times on Dana White's Contender Series. The first time he didn't get the contract, but he did win by decision. He just fought 2 weeks ago on Dana White's Contender Series, where he won again by decision. Impa is an American. He's 7-0 as a professional mixed martial artist, 26 years old, 5 feet 11 inches tall, and has a 73-inch reach. This fight will be his UFC debut. He has 5 decision wins on his record and 2 submission wins. Impa bounces around a lot on his feet, and he has good fundamentals. He's still really young to the game, but he has solid fundamentals and fast leg kicks and good hands. Look for him to use those in this fight, and he has a gas tank that can push him through all 15 minutes. He's proven that over and over again, going multiple times to decision. But ultimately, I feel like Maki Pitolo is just a little bit better and a little bit more technical with his strikes. He has more tools to offer, and I think that Maki Pitolo pushes it all the way through to a decision, and he wins there. So now we move on to the first fight on the main card. This fight has been pushed off of a couple of times at this point right now. This is the Magomed Ankalaev versus Yeon Cutelaba rematch. This fight's been rescheduled a few times. The first time that they fought, the fight was stopped controversially by the referee. Cutelaba was taking some strikes on the feet. He was throwing with Ankalaev, but then Ankalaev hit him with the head kick, and he looked like he was, maybe trying to play it off like he was stunned, trying to get Ankalaev to step in. Maybe he was hurt a little bit. But then, again, Ankalaev hit him again. Same thing. And it kind of really looked like he was trying to bait him in, and he looked fine, and he was ready to fire and throw, and he was still firing and throwing. He didn't get dropped or anything like that, but the ref stepped in, and immediately Cutelaba was protesting. And as soon as he starts protesting, fight's over, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. But it was a terrible stoppage, in my opinion, on the ref's part. I can understand why he did, however, stop the fight. Your job as a ref is to look out for fighter safety. I'm always in favor of fights being stopped early as opposed to fights being stopped late. So I get the frustration, but they get to run it back now. They get to run it back. We were expected to see this fight a couple weeks ago. This fight's been rescheduled 2 times. The first time they were supposed to fight, it was canceled because of the coronavirus. The whole event got canceled. They started moving things around, trying to figure out what they're going to do, and then they rescheduled this fight. And the second time they were supposed to fight, Cutelaba ended up testing positive for the coronavirus. So now Cutelaba's coronavirus free, and hopefully we'll finally get to see this fight and put an end to this mess here. Magomed, he's a Russian. He's 13-1 overall in MMA. He's 28 years old, 6 feet 3 inches tall. He has a 75-inch reach, and he's 4-1 inside of the UFC. He's currently on a 4-fight win streak, including that knockout win to Yeon Cutelaba. The one fight that Ankalaev did lose, though, however, he was dominating that fight. There was probably maybe 20 seconds left in it, if that, less than that, 5-10 seconds left, something like that. And he ended up getting caught in a submission and tapped out with very little time left in the round, but he dominated that fight too. Ankalaev has looked good in every single one of his fights except for that little mistake. Before signing with the UFC, he was the WFCA 205-pound champion. He was the Ahmed Fight Show 205-pound champion. He's an international master of sport in combat sambo with 7 knockouts, 5 decisions, and 1 submission on his record. He's going against Yeon Cutelaba from Moldova. Cutelaba is 15-5 in mixed martial arts. He's 26 years old, 6 feet 1 inches tall, with a 75-inch reach. He's 4-4 inside the UFC, with his last fight being the controversial loss to Ankalaev. He does have a notable win over Khalil Roundtree. He's competed in Greco-Roman wrestling. He's the Sambo national champion and a Judo national champion, with 12 knockouts on his record, 2 submissions, and 1 decision. Overall, I feel like Magomed Ankalaev has not been pushed yet, and up till outside of that little fault there, he's looked really, really good, and I don't expect that to change here. I think that Yeon Cutelaba is going to sleep. He's going to get knocked out in round 1 by Magomed Ankalaev. All right, now we move on to Ricardo the Bully Lamas versus Señor Perfecto Bill Algeo. Ricardo Lamas is an American. He's 19-8 in MMA, and he's 38 years old. He's 5 feet 8 inches tall with a 71-inch reach, and he made his UFC debut back in 2011. He's currently 9-7 in the UFC, most recently losing to Calvin Kattar by first-round knockout. Lamas is 2-3 since 2017, but he does have significant wins over Darren Elkins by third-round knockout, Jason Knight by first-round knockout, and Charles Oliveira by second-round submission. He challenged Jose Aldo for the 145-pound title belt. He came up short, losing that fight by decision. Before competing in the UFC, he was competing in the WEC. When the WEC merged with the UFC, Lamas came into the UFC as well. He's a former Division III wrestler and a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's the former ISCF 155-pound champion. Lamas has 8 decisions, 6 knockouts, and 5 submissions on his record. Unfortunately, he's been knocked out 5 times, and he's lost by decision 3 times. He's a solid striker with great positioning and great kicks, and a solid ground game. This is a tough fight for anybody, regardless of his age and the results of his most recent fights. Now he'll be going against Bill Algeo, who's an American. He's 16-4 as a professional, and he went 4-0 as an amateur. 31 years old, 5 feet 11 inches tall, and has a 73.5-inch reach. Algeo is making his UFC debut. He did compete on Dana White's Contender Series, where he lost by decision. After that, he went and competed in Cage Fury FC, picked up another win, and then he was signed to the UFC recently. He is the former Ring of Combat 145-pound champion, and he was able to successfully defend that belt 3 times. Algeo is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner with 6 submissions on his record, 4 decision wins, and 3 knockouts. He has been submitted 2 times, and he's lost by decision once. He has wild and reckless striking, but it's very fan-friendly to watch. Unfortunately, it does leave him open sometimes to be countered. He gets himself out of position a little bit, but his movement does kind of remind me of Tim Elliott with his hands down, moving his head around, not really protecting himself. Very reckless and very wild. Fun to watch, but ultimately, I think that in this fight, we're going to see Ricardo, the Bully Lamas, pull out another decision win. So we move on to the next fight. This is an interesting fight because we have the number 14 ranked flyweight in Yon Kim versus the number 14 ranked strawweight in Alexa Grosso. Here's Kim. She's from South Korea. She has 9 wins, 2 losses, and 2 draws on her record. Her 2 draws came in her very first 2 fights of her career. Since then, she rattled off 9-0 before joining with the UFC, where she's ultimately 3-2 at. She has a black belt in Wushu, a 3rd-degree black belt in Hapkido, and a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Most recently, she finished her last fight against Nadia Kassem with a beautiful hook to the body in round 2. She's the former Deep Jewels bantamweight champion, where she was able to defeat Takeo Hashi for the belt. Takeo Hashi was actually one of her draws in the beginning of her career, so she was able to avenge that draw and win by decision in that fight. Firefist got into martial arts in 8th grade after she'd seen a kickboxing film. It really piqued her interest in martial arts, and she started training in a variety of martial arts, ultimately leading to a career in mixed martial arts. Kim has 4 submission wins, 3 decision wins, and 2 knockout wins to her record. Both of her losses have come in the UFC by decision. One of them was to Antonina Shevchenko, the sister of the champion. The other one was to Lucy Cutelaba. One interesting thing to see when you watch Kim fight is she never shows emotion on her face. It's always the same facial expression, whether she's in a difficult spot or not, whether she's getting punched or throwing a punch, it never changes. Unfortunately, though, I feel like Kim is one of the slower females that we have in the division. She does throw good straight punches, and she has a good counter punch that she throws, but overall, her striking is fairly slow, and her movement is fairly slow. And up until Nadia Kassem burned herself out, she was able to land several punches using the speed and quickness on Kim. Kim ended up taking advantage of Nadia Kassem gassing out in her last fight and hit her with that body shot and put her down. So now she's fighting Alexa Grosso, who's moving up in weight. Alexa Grosso is from Mexico. She's 11-3 overall in MMA. She's 27 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall with a 66-inch reach. And she considers herself a boxer with a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. She's 3-3 in the UFC, coming off of a decision loss to Carla Esparza. However, she did defeat Karolina Kowalkiewicz by decision, and Ronda Marcos by split decision, and Heather Clark by decision inside of the UFC. Prior to signing with the UFC, Alexa competed in Invicta, where she went 4-0. All 3 of her losses have come in the UFC. 2 of them were by decision. One was to Felice Herrig, and the other was to Carla Esparza, the former champion. She was, however, finished by Tatiana Suarez by submission. This is her first fight at 125 pounds, so we'll see how stepping up in weight works out for her. She does have solid straight hands, great boxing, and she should have the speed advantage in this fight. While she might be the smaller fighter, I think that she'll be able to outbox Kim in this fight. I think that she'll be able to stand out there and throw her punches, land pretty much at will. She's just got to be careful of Kim's counter punch there that she likes to throw. And ultimately, I think Alexa Grosso comes home with another win. She's going to win this fight by decision. Now we move on to the co-main event of the night. This is ruthless Robbie Lawler, the former 170-pound champion, versus Neil, the Haitian sensation, Magny, at 170 pounds. Robbie Lawler is the number 13 ranked UFC welterweight fighter right now. He's an American with 28 wins, 14 losses, and 1 no contest on his record. He's 38 years old, 5 feet 11 inches tall with a 74-inch reach, and he made his UFC debut back at UFC 37. Lawler is 13-8 in the UFC, defeating former champion Johnny Hendricks by split decision to win the belt. He was able to successfully defend that belt twice before he lost it to Tyrone Woodley by knockout in the first round. Unfortunately, Robbie Lawler has gone 1-4 in his last 5 fights, and he's currently on a 3-fight losing streak with a decision loss to Colby Covington, a technical submission to Ben Askren, and a decision loss to Rafael Dos Anjos. 2 of those are former UFC champions. Ben Askren's a national champion and Olympian, and a former ONE FC world champion as well. So he's done nothing but fought world championship and top-level fighters for the last several fights, and that's all that he's lost to. He did defeat Carlos Condit by split decision. He beat Rory McDonald twice. He one time won by split decision, and then the other time he finished him with a 5th-round knockout in a vicious, brutal fight. Robbie Lawler is the former Elite XC 185-pound champion. He's the former Icon Sport 185-pound champion, and the former Super Brawl 185-pound champion as well. He has 20 knockouts on his record, 7 decisions, and only 1 submission. You know Robbie Lawler's not coming out there to look to take you down and submit you. He's going to come out there and fight and scrap. In his losses, he's lost 6 times by decisions, 5 times by submission, and he's only been knocked out twice in his entire MMA career. Now, he'll be going against Neil Magny. Neil Magny's an American, 33 years old, 23-7 in MMA. He's 6 feet 3 inches tall, and he has an 80-inch reach, the longest reach on the entire fight card tonight. He made his way into the UFC as well on the Ultimate Fighter show, where he went 3-1. And since then, he's gone 16-6 inside of the UFC. Magny's on a 2-fight win streak, both of them coming by decisions over Anthony Rocco Martin and Jingliang Li. Neil Magny is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with 13. Neil Magny is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with 13 decision wins on his record, 7 knockouts, and 3 submissions. Magny has, however, been submitted 4 times, knocked out twice, and he has lost 1 decision. Magny holds 2 UFC records right now. He holds the record for the most consecutive fights in a year, and that's 5. He shares that with a few other people. And then he also has the record for the most consecutive wins inside of the UFC in a calendar year, and that is also 5. There's only 2 people in the UFC that have done that, and he's one of them. Ultimately, though, however, I think that Neil Magny is going to be a little bit too long for Robbie Lawler. Like I said, he's 4-1 in his last 5. They have been championship level guys, but Neil Magny's looked good, and he's done a great job of using his height and his range, especially having the 80-inch reach. I think he's going to be able to keep Robbie Lawler at the end of his punches, and he'll be able to pick him apart throughout the 3 rounds of that fight and then end up winning a decision. Now we move on to the main event of the night. At 205 pounds, we have the number 5 ranked Anthony Smith versus the number 8 ranked Alexander Rakic at 205 pounds. Anthony Smith is an American. He's 33-15 overall in MMA, 32 years old, 6 feet 4 inches tall, with a 76-inch reach advantage, and he's 8-4 inside of the UFC, most recently losing to Glover Teixeira by knockout in the 5th round. Glover Teixeira pretty much dominated him in that fight, but prior to that, he did defeat Alexander Gustafsson in the 4th round by submission. He also has knockout wins over Rashad Evans and Mauricio Shogun Rua in the 1st round. Anthony Smith is a former 205-pound title challenger. He challenged John Jones for the belt, ended up losing that fight by decision. Anthony Smith does have a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he is the former Victory FC 185-pound champion, the former Cage Fury FC 185-pound champion, and he has competed in Strikeforce. Overall, he has 18 knockouts on his record, 13 submissions, and 2 decision wins on his record. Anthony Smith is coming to put you away. He's going against Alexander Rakic, who's from Austria. He's 12-2 in MMA, 28 years old, 6 feet 4 inches tall. He has a 78-inch reach, and he's 4-1 inside of the UFC, most recently losing a split decision to Volkan Oezdemir. Prior to that, he beat Devin Clark and Jimmy Manawa by 1st-round knockouts. Rakic is a former kickboxer and boxer with over 40 fights between the two before making the transition into MMA. He's currently a purple belt in Jiu-Jitsu with 9 knockouts on his record, 2 decision wins, and 1 submission win. In his last fight against Volkan Oezdemir, he showed great striking, great patience. He ate some really wicked leg kicks on his leg that really didn't seem to affect him, but it left a baseball-sized bump right there below his knee. His corners were really trying to work it out in between the rounds, getting some ice on it, trying to spread the swelling out a little bit. But Volkan Oezdemir was able to land several kicks there over and over again at will, basically, and Rakic just walked right through him. They didn't seem to phase him. It looked nasty on his leg, but it didn't bother him at all. Rakic had great combos, very fast hands. Depending on who you're asking, that fight was anybody's fight, but it was a great fight. I saw a lot from him. I was really impressed with him based off of the fact that he was able to just take the pain from not only from the kicks on the leg, but also from some of the punches that Oezdemir was able to land. And I was very impressed overall with his striking in several of his fights. And ultimately, I predict that Alexander Rakic will knock him out in the 3rd round. That's my fight picks for UFC Fight Night Vegas 8. It's time to crush some cans.